Another week is in the books. Let's talk about how it went as I'm journeying towards the CCIE. So I'm making the journey towards the CCIE, and I gotta tell you, at this point, I'm feeling pretty good about things. I'm feeling like I'm really getting to be at that expert level, and that within the next couple months, I'll definitely be ready to take the exam. That actually leads into my next point, though. I'm a little stressed about a couple things that are going on here. One of those being, will the exams reopen in time by the end of this year for me to take the exams? I don't really know. Texas, Richardson, Texas is where the exam location is in the United States. In Texas, well, they went through a pretty bad time over the last few months with COVID-19, and I'm not super optimistic that the exam locations will be reopened by the end of this year. Now, in the previous video, I did mention something about having a personal thing going on in my life, and I'm not going to talk about it just yet. I'm not ready. I'm not there. It's a good thing overall, but it would prevent me from taking the exam next year. So that's kind of a big deal, and that's why I'd really like to get this exam taken by the end of this year. Now, of course, I would not want to rush anything. I don't want to jump back into an unsafe situation. I don't want to put my friends and family at risk so that I could take an exam and then, get coronavirus or whatever. That would be a bad thing. So I appreciate Cisco at putting the safety and security of all of their people first. That's really the most important thing here. And I'm just being selfish when I say I want the exam. I want to take the exam at some point this year. So that's where I am. My first stressor there is just about the timing of things. Even the mentality of taking exam itself, just knowing what your deadline is in the first place. When am I going to take this exam? That also puts into perspective how you should allocate your time between now and that point. So not knowing when I could even take the exam adds a little bit of stress and preparation into it too. But the real stressor, the real thing that's going on in my head now, the real thing that I'm really focused on is the design portion. I think that's one of the things that not enough people are talking about when we're talking about the CCIE exam. Think about it. Here's the first thing. Let's just nail this one down right here. You don't pass design, you don't pass the lab. So that's a big deal. You gotta just get that one in your head, that design is going to be just as important as the deploy, operate, and optimize, because you have to have both in order to pass. And design is a different mindset than the CCIE of the past. You see, when you're studying for the last CCIE, it was basically deploy, operate, and optimize, and then a troubleshoot section. But you could spend the majority of your time working on the command line, learning some show commands, learning the debug commands, and as you're building things, you could debug them and learn how to troubleshoot them at the same time. That was the previous exam. Now we're talking a completely different mindset. What is the best protocol to use given a situation and given requirements? We're not talking about what is it going to do on the command line anymore. We're talking about what should you choose to do before you actually do it now. And that's a very different mindset, and they hit you out of the gate with it. That's the first thing you get tested on. So imagine you studied design first or even middle of your journey here, and then you finished. You went strong on configuration, operate, and optimize. And then maybe you stayed up, you did an all-nighter the night before the exam, and you roll into the lab exam, and the first thing you get hit with is a really hard 3-hour design exam. That could be really stressful. And if you don't do well on that 3-hour design portion of the exam, that design portion is going to end, and you may be going into the 5-hour deploy, operate, and optimize feeling a little defeated and a little deflated. So all of a sudden, when I start really thinking about those things, it's really putting it into perspective, like, wait a minute, don't overlook the design portion. Even though it's 3 of the 8 hours, that's still equally as important towards the success of your exam. You still have to pass that. So how am I going to prepare for the design section? That's really a good question. The first thing that comes to mind is the ENSLD exam, the ENSID as we're calling it on Twitter, which I think is pretty awesome. I absolutely, first of all, plan on recording that information for CBT Nuggets. There are some other trainers who have expressed interest in joining me with recording that, so I think that's going to be really cool and really critical, especially as I nail down these topics. So I'm going to spend a lot of time reading that textbook, which comes out next week, September 10th, and I'm going to just plow through that book. I also recently purchased from the Cisco Press website, it was on sale this week, the Optimal Routing Design textbook. Let's check it out real quick. I just fired up my Twitter here so that we could talk about this real quick. First of all, yeah, I did. I bought a couple of these shirts and I'm wearing one in this video, as you just saw. I just love those shirts. Anyways, let's scroll down here. There it is, Optimal Routing Design. This book was half off. It's an ebook. It's not a physical book, and I vastly prefer physical books instead of ebooks, but I'm still going to read this one. It was around 2005 is when it was written, but look, large-scale net like BGP, EIGRP, and OSPF, the core portions of it have not changed since 2005. Now, yeah, they've added some new features here and there and stuff like that, but you can see it tells us we're focusing on EIGRP, OSPF, IS, and how to use BGP core in a large-scale environment, I'm guessing is what the end of that sentence was going to be. So after I'm done with the ENSLD exam, which we'll take a look at right here, I'm going to jump back to the Optimal Routing Design textbook too. But speaking of that ENSLD exam, look at these exam topics. Like these are not easy topics, or at least they don't look like they would be easy for me, because this is all about when to use these things. When do you use these particular protocols? The Advanced Enterprise Campus Network section looks really fascinating to me. Like, when should we use the first hop redundancy protocols, graceful restart, BFD? You get the idea, but I really like this stuff down here. Describe the SD-Access architecture and describe the SD-Access fabric design considerations. Then, down here a little bit more, you've got the same things with SD-WAN. Why does this matter? Let me show you. If I jump from the ENSLD outline over to the CCIE Enterprise outline, check this out. Under Domain 2, I'm going to expand software-defined infrastructure down, and right here on 2.1a and 2.2a, look at that action verb they gave us. Design. Design an SD-Access solution. Design a SD-WAN solution. Then they do talk about deployment down here. We've got templates and localized policies and centralized policies up here. We talk about the fabric border handoff. This looks like configuration here from B down. It's all right, config up here too. But we've got design as our first bullet point. So seeing that the ENSLD covers these design portions here, I think that's going to be directly applicable to what's going on here in the exam. If I clear the screen here, there's one other thing that I'll point out. They actually pointed this out, I should say, during their webinar when they talked about the exam blueprint. Identify use cases for FlexVPN. That's design. So we know that we have to understand a lot about FlexVPN and when you would use it, what the design is, how does it differ from other VPN offerings. If I jump back to the ENSLD outline, I'll scroll down just a little bit, we see some WAN information. Here's a lot about VPNs here, but what is missing from this list? FlexVPN. So the ENSLD exam is going to get me most of the way there. I'll know how all of these items differ from each other. I'm just going to have to tack on one more thing on top of that, which is FlexVPN. That's going to help me get through that design section. So yeah, design, that's where my head is at right now, and I'm kind of glad I'm saving it for last. I mean, it really makes a lot of sense that now I've learned how to deploy these protocols, then figuring out, now that I know a lot about them, or mostly everything about them, when is the right time to use them? That's what I think the design is all about, and I'm really glad that I'm saving that for the end of my journey, or towards the end of my journey. Now, some other updates there, what's going on in my world. First of all, I'm done with SD-WAN. I've uploaded the last nugget. I've covered all of the bullet points in my own personal journey in the ENSDWI exam. I really love that David Peñalosa called it the InSandwich exam. I'm just going to call it that from now on, and I absolutely love it. So before I jump into recording for SCORE and recording for DevCore, I'm going to try and focus my time on finishing my routing and services studies. The things that I have left to study for the routing and services are going to be BGP, multicast, some of the VPN technologies, although I feel pretty good about the VPN technologies, and some of the services technologies, although I feel pretty good about those. Really, the core of it is going to be focused on BGP and multicast. So I think I can get all of that BGP and multicast done if I dedicate 8 hours a day to it over the next week or two. Then I'm going to jump into SCORE recording as well as DevCore recording, and I'm going to be be trying to find ways to map what I'm doing there to other exam objectives within the CCIE. Things like streaming telemetry and that gRPC telemetry bullet point, that's going to be a big one in the CCIE, I think. So I need to practice that a little bit more, and it's going to be great to record that as part of the DevCore exam. Also, I'm going to throw this out there. If you're not listening to the Art of Network Engineering podcast, you should probably do that right now. Look, I don't even like podcasts. I don't listen to podcasts, but I listen to that one. It's really, really good because it's really authentic. It's real people talking about their journey, either working their way up from, the very bottom to the very top, or just being where they are. And that's okay to be just where you are. You don't have to be an architect, and you don't have to be a senior level person to be proud of what you're doing. And I really, really appreciate that. That's one of the core messages that I'm taking away from this particular podcast. So to the people who are creating the Art of Network Engineering podcast, kudos to you. Whenever I'm decompressing, maybe I'm playing a video game or something, a low pressure, low stress video game, I put on that podcast, and it's just great to hear about other people's journeys and experience through this. So check out the Art of Network Engineering podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or whatever other podcast platform you like. So that's been my journey. Thanks for stopping by, y'all. I'll see you in the next one.